was to rank your expertise in languages, first would be French, second Italian, and third English.
We've been promoting diversification within the wine market for years now.
Yes.
And this change in the market hasn't happened overnight. If you go back to 2010, Bordeaux's share of trade was in the 90s, over 90%.
Yeah.
But if you look at it today, it's closer to 50%, and it goes even below that month on month sometimes. So there's been a huge shift, a sea change in the type of wines that people are putting money into, and we've watched that, we've observed that for a number of years. It's not something that's happened all of a sudden, but it really is becoming more prominent now as time goes on, and that does really back up our strategy that you should look to spread your risk, if you like, across many different regions. The wine market does tend to perform on a regional basis, and you see, for example, Burgundy will have an uplift, it will have a great spurt of growth, but it will then stagnate for a short while, and while that's stagnating, for example, California will see a growth spurt. And it's like any financial market, it works in cycles, and as long as you are aware of that and can plan ahead and have a reasonable strategy to allow for those cycles, you should be able to see a very good return over a 5 to 10 year period.
No, absolutely, and that's something that we have always professed, is that medium to long term, 5 to 10 years, when you can realistically see a much better return on your investments within this market, of course. And as you stated quite correctly, Bordeaux dominated the market for much of 2010, early part of 2011 as well. However, diversification is key in any investments, including fine wine, of course. And with the diversification we've seen from beyond Bordeaux, we've got Burgundy, as you stated, there's other regions, South Australia, some Spanish wines, and so on and so forth. What would your predictions be for 2020? Obviously, I know it's just been announced today that, of course, the tariffs are going to be frozen for now, but what are the premonitions for the year ahead?
I would say in very basic terms, my personal belief is that Northern Rhone is a good place to store some capital for the time being. That's an area that we've been expecting some growth from for quite some time now, and it hasn't quite materialised in the same degree as it has in other regions. So we feel it's still overdue, a growth spurt that I mentioned earlier on. So I would say some of the top flight wines from the Northern Rhone would be a great place to look. But as you said as well, Italian wines, they have a great entry point financially. If you've ever looked at the price of getting involved in the premium Burgundy market, you would have balked at some of the prices. That really is the big boys area. But if you like that kind of level of performance, you can see similar performance from Italian wines at a fraction of the cost. And that, as you mentioned as well, Champagne is really coming into its own. And it is a really popular region with our clients, mainly because they understand Champagne. When you're talking to somebody about a wine, a red wine that costs thousands of pounds a bottle, it's hard for our clients, who in many cases are just ordinary people, to understand what the cycle of that product is. They understand it's an expensive wine, but when do they ever see that being consumed? Whereas with prestige champagne, people understand it gets consumed. They see it being consumed, and in many cases they consume it themselves. So they understand that product cycle a lot better. And it's just great to see that region getting its prominence. There were some brands that were bumped up into the top 10 of the LiveX Power 100. So yeah, it's a really good time to be looking at Champagne. Definitely Italy for its entry level and its performance. And I'm not willing to give up on Rhone yet, so I definitely divert some of my funds towards Northern Rhone.
No, I agree with that. And as you mentioned as well, with the Champagne houses, there were 3 notable ones in particular that we have dealt with for the last, I believe, at least 6 years. That being Krug, which was in at number 4, Louis Roederer Cristal at number 5, Moet and Chandon, I believe that's linked because of the Dom Perignon, was in at number 9, and Sassicaia from Italy, number 7. So it was the first time ever that any first growth from Bordeaux, Mouton Rothschild, Lafite Rothschild, Margaux, Aubryon, were outside the top 10 in the 14 plus years LiveX been doing it. I believe the only one that retained its top 10 status was Château. But I also believe as well, Napa Valley is something that's going to do extraordinarily well in 2020. I believe some of the statistics that Livex are throwing out there have proven that the Napa wineries, Ridge Montebello, Dominus, Screaming Eagle, to name a few, have performed up to around, I believe, 78%, or within that region within the last 5 years, outperforming some of the other sub-indices for Livex as well. Because, of course, with Napa, you've got the big scores, you've got the rarity, and you've got the reputation. And it's something different. And again, it's diversifying from beyond the tradition, I suppose. Where do you see your online wine course within the next 10 to 15 years?
Well, actually, I'm already working on the online sake course, which is with a master sake sommelier.
Oh, wow.
I'd like to do a beer course. I'd like to do a spirits course. I would like other people with different voices to do wine 101, like the introductory class like I have, but in their own style, because
Yes.
I speak to a very particular demographic of people. There's people that love my humor and the way that I am, but I'm actually a big proponent of other people teaching. I never discourage somebody from doing their own wine course or anything like that, because we all have our different spaces and we get to all work collectively on it, right? And so I'm working on a digital marketing agency for wineries. I think that's a huge problem, that they don't have really good marketing teams, doing really high quality work from a wine person's perspective. Because I find that a lot of marketing teams will just kind of market to general consumers and maybe don't do it in a way that appeals to wine lovers and wine drinkers. And so having somebody who can like bridge that gap, it's going to take a while for that. But yeah, creating all sorts of different courses, just having lots and lots of free content that's really high quality and fun. Like, I love doing fun stuff. I want to have an entire album of raps, wine raps, because
I'm ready to hit download and subscribe off the iTunes store. I'll be your first customer for sure.
I listened to Eminem my whole life. My babysitter listened to Eminem when I was in, 3rd to 6th grade or something. And
Okay.
I just loved it. And I always joked around about doing something like that. And, I did my first one last year, and it felt really good for my soul. I don't know if anybody else liked it, but it's an outright.
Yeah, the only complaint, sorry to interject there, Cristie, but the only complaint I had, I was really getting into it, and it was over.
I know.
Literally, I was like, what?
You know what? I watched a YouTube video that was like how to write your own rap. And within 12 minutes of the video, I was like off to the races, and I made the rap in about 45 minutes. And I was like, this is it. And so I texted my friend who's a EDM DJ, and he also does like trap music. He also made all the wine course music. So like every section has a different theme, and it's like designed to give you the feeling that I want it to give you. And he's incredible. And he made this track, and the track was just so outrageous. I mean, it's like a Migos song.
Okay.
So, I don't know if you listen to it. It has, the sound of glasses crashing. It's all custom corks popping, like everything. And so I said, I have to do a crazy video. And I only spent like, I don't know, $1,500 on the whole thing. I mean,
seriously?
My friend, she was in this leadership program that I was doing at the time. It was like a life coaching program. And so she goes, I'm a videographer. I can help. And, I'll do it for like $500. So I was like, sure, that's perfect. She rolls up with her own Red camera, at least $75,000 of equipment total. She just rolls up on set.
Wow.
And, I got a Ferrari for like a few hours. It was super fun. Yeah, no, but I just love, and all of it came together within 2 weeks. Like, it was out, it was edited in 3 days. Like, we just did it just for funsies. And
it was really well
had
done.
No purpose.
Honestly, it was really well done. Drop that
I want to
album.
do more of that. I want to do.
I like Celaya, actually. Celaya is a good...
It's a very good wine.
Yeah.
Very good wine.
Yeah.
As a
I haven't had it much, but when
As a
I've had
bucket
it,
list, what about Saskar 85?
I've had it. And it's really good. I mean, I had it when it was a quarter of the price. It was still very expensive. I had it... I went to a wine tasting at Cristie's, a Saskar one, many years ago, probably 20 years ago, and they were showing it then. And it's funny, it was one of those wines that I told people that 85 Sassicaia, it was one of my people should buy it when they saw it.
Yes.
And I think I've been proved right. I don't know how much it is now. What is it? 10,000 for 6 or something like that?
No, you're looking at a lot. You're looking at a lot more. You're looking more, I would say, 12 to 15,000, depending on country, location. Hedonism got it for nearer to £20,000, I believe. Hong Kong, you're looking £25,000.
Yeah.
And that's like a 6 to 12 bottles, and that's dependent on merchant and supplier as well. So it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Considering it probably cost only a couple £100 back then. So,
and I imagine you can probably, if you do your research, some of the recent vintages of Sassicaia, up there they won't be far off that quality of 85 when they're probably
the 2016 actually, the Wine Advocate, it was given up 100 points. Monica
and they're
Lana.
probably 1,200 quid a case now, something like that.
Yeah, they're really
like that. So actually, things to look out for are those Sassicaia.
Definitely,
I think they've broken through. We're going off, things like Sassicaia have broken through that into that market of a brand
massively,
and it's obviously a Bordeaux blend.
Yes,
but
they're very well recognised for sure.
Actually, an incredible campaign because, as you know, the whole world has changed. Everything kind of collapsed with the lockdowns everywhere.
Yes.
And we really didn't know in March, April if we would do a Premier campaign or not. And we were in touch with lots of clients around the world who basically told us we need a Premier campaign, we need Bordeaux, we need things to move on, and we also need not to talk just about coronavirus.
Yes.
So we try to reinvent ourselves. We try to put everything in order to make it happen despite the conditions, which were crazy. No one could come to Bordeaux to taste the wines. And what people needed is to have a few experts giving their advice and their opinion on the quality of the vintage overall and specifically Château by Château. So we, logistically speaking, we reinvent the world, and it was great actually, and it worked. And thanks to the fact that the experts played their role, that the clients also were able to taste and talk to their own customers, we started a Premier campaign, which was for me kind of miraculous, and it was successful because we also listened to the needs of the clients who said we needed to be well priced. So all of us made an effort to price this vintage, which is a great vintage, at a terrific price. Definitely. And I think if you were a wine lover, you had no choice than to buy 2019 of your favorite Château. Personally, we also bought a lot of 19 because we know that it's something which should not be missed.
Music-wise, well, what is your genres that, if you was to put your, phone on shuffle as an example, what could we expect to hear?
You'd hear quite a bit of Queen. So I'm a bit of a Queen tragic. So.
Yes. Did you see the film Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yeah, I've seen it several times already. So
brilliant, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I was most probably a little bit before my time because I was born in '75. But yeah,
okay.
But yeah, definitely a bit of a Queen tragic.
Again, I'm very envious of a lot of the wines you've been able to deal with yourself and obviously sample. But is there one, I suppose, that is on that bucket list, whether it's a specific brand or from a specific region and a specific vintage year, that you're like, okay, this is like, I suppose, your I've made it moment, not literally like, okay, whoopie doo, I'm done now, but you're like, this is why I got involved in this in the first place?
Yeah, I very clearly, I 59 Obrion and 61 Margaux.
Wow.
I had them at the same time. Somebody gifted them to Wolfgang, actually. It was his birthday, I think. And they had me open it. They were serving it, and they told me, of course, taste it. And I cried. Because I never liked Bordeaux. I was opposite from you. I tasted all this Bordeaux, because at Spago people would bring in all of their collectible wines, which was really awesome. But I just didn't, younger Bordeaux, it's cool, 82 Lafite. Oh, okay. It was good, but it wasn't like soul passion evoking. I could see how it's very good. So no shade to that, producer or anything, but it's more about like, I didn't fully get it. And then I got it. When I had, the 61 Margaux, I felt like, wow, like this is what wine is like. And this is why people like Bordeaux so much. This is why they hold it, because it was on a completely different level. And I really did like shed a tear. Like I just had to.
I can relate. There, absolutely. So, all right. So for me, like my greatest one was the Penfolds Grange 2008. That was. I was fortunate enough that Robert Parker was actually doing a tour of Europe back in 2014, and so he was at this major like fine wine shop called Hedonism Wines, which I will take you to when you do come over. You would love it, and you got to sample like several 100 point scoring wines, and the Penfolds Grange 2008 for me was just I still remember it to this day. It's really, well, once it's ingrained, and it's really good. But all right, just lastly then, you mentioned of course Bordeaux. It's not exactly hit and miss for you, but it's not, it's Bordeaux. What for you is your go-to region?
Oh, that's so hard. Honestly, I can tell you some wines that I like.
Okay.
Well, I really enjoy Alsace just in general.
Yes.
I think it's just so complex and just beautiful and everything. I usually like it. That'll always make me happy. Château, if I just am having, I don't really like very tannic heavy reds for the most part. Like in the right scenario, sure. But if I'm just like enjoying on my day off, I just usually don't. I think it just has to do with palate fatigue a little bit because it's just heavy. But Torbreck Runrig. Oh, one of my favorite wines. It's Aussie Shiraz from Barros, and it is ridiculously good. If you have not had it, I highly recommend it immediately. It's the only like group of wines that I have in my fridge right now that I really don't touch. Really, 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 like I would cry if somebody opened them, because aged Torbreck Runrig is insanely good. If you like Aussie Shiraz, you got to do it.
Cristie, you're preaching to the converted. Honestly, right? This is. Could you just see there's that box just there, Torbreck, on the ground? Could you open it? Literally, this is an empty bottle. I don't know if you see it, but it's not the Runrig. I thought it's the lead. It's the lead.
Okay, that's a good one. I like Runrig personally.
Oh no, Runrig is amazing. It is insane. It's beautiful, and well, we've got a box here which I don't think can be opened, but it's the Struy, still Torbreck, but still, no, Torbreck, absolutely. That's no. You will have a great time when you come here. Honestly, you'll leave with a few bottles as well. That's for sure. But
for me, it's the challenges of, how do we now, that one hot day has sort of really put a bit of a dampener on this vintage from a grape growing point of view.
Yes.
But from a winemaking point of view, the winemakers are rubbing their hands together because they're going to be looking at, lower yielding crops. They'll look at more concentrated fruits, smaller berries, everything that they like about a great quality year.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I don't think quite the volume of fruit's going to be there that's going to be pleasing to anyone, especially the consumer, because there will be a much smaller vintage, but the quality is going to be fantastic.
Okay, and would that normally then result in maybe a slightly higher price? Or?
Yeah, I don't. It's not a trend in Australia. If we were to try and compensate with pricing, we most probably should be nearly having to triple the pricing of the wine. But you're not going to see that. Generally, we're a lot more restrained in Australia when it comes to some of those better quality vintages. We're not just going to ramp up the price because it was a better vintage.
Sure.
Especially from, I suppose, Chris and my perspective as well. What we're trying to do is create something unique, something that's a little bit different, that is going to last beyond the generations, and we don't want to just ramp the prices up for the sake of it. I think we've with the Dimchurch and Hoffman, we set our price as a bit of a benchmark, and I think we're holding that price there because I think it is an expensive wine, but the people that are buying the wine is getting value for money.
Oh, massive! When you consider the cost of Dimchurch and Hoffman compared to some other wines from the New World and the Old World, which similar quality, some are less, and they're asking for more. In terms of what you're actually offering, cost per bottle, even though, like you said, it could be on the more expensive side, in the grand scheme of things, is actually worth the money for the contents in which you're getting.
Oh, definitely. When you're talking about Chris, who I deem as one of the best Shiraz winemakers in the world, and the attention to detail that I put into my vineyard, and especially the parcels that go into high-end products, not just the Dimchurch and Hoffman, but the Tallbrick Runrig, the Glatzheim and Ra, the Two Hands Aries, all those super quality, and it's not all the same fruit. How I grow for those different winemakers is stylistically quite different. The soil types it's on is different as well. But when it comes to the Dimchurch and Hoffman, it's really about going through the vineyard and tasting the fruit and seeing those very minute differences between the vines and between the fruit, and making sure that we're getting the best of the best fruit from my vineyard.
Yeah, definitely. And with regards to that, actually, in your opinion, what does make Australian wine so special, and what makes your wine special too?
I think what makes Australian wine special is what we don't have to do. It's very interesting. There are sites that are dry grown, and we can dry grow on what I would say is a normal or an average growing year. We can do quite a bit of dry grown fruit in those years. A lot of times we're doing supplementary irrigation, but we don't have the same chemical inputs. We don't have the same inputs into our farm. We introduce a lot of organic matter, organic carbon. So reclaimed green waste from the township of Adelaide. They break it down into a compost. We put it in the vineyard. That helps with soil moisture retention. The vines are just remain healthy overall. Yes. A lot healthier overall. So when you start looking at, I suppose, how it's more so the little things that we do, but we don't, the chemical inputs from a spraying point of view. This year has been quite a dry year. So basically put on 2 post flowering sprays, and we haven't done any sprays after that. But then we're still going through and putting kelp products on to alleviate the stress on the vines as well. So we've got those. It's always trying to work out what is the best for the vine for that given year, and each year is slightly different on how we're going to treat those vines.
And would you say that's more experience that then plays a significant role in predetermining that, or would you call in other people to offer a second or third opinion?
Generally, I'll always bounce ideas off of other growers. It's crystal ball gazing to a certain degree, because you're looking at how far you're looking into the future. Is December going to be wet? Is it going to be dry?
Right.
Everyone was sort of predicting a dry season, so you have it in the shed. You have the arsenal in the shed ready to go, but if you don't have to use it, well, why use it?
Yeah.
And Chris's approach to winemaking and our approach to selecting the wines is no different. It's what you don't do during the ferment. It's what you don't do during the maturation process. People sometimes are going in and topping up their barrels every month. When we're topping up our barrels, we do it twice a year. We adjust do sulfur checks and adjustments once a year as well. We're not trying to manipulate what's actually happening. We're just letting the wine tell us. I'm letting the vineyard tell me what to do. Yeah. Chris is letting the wines tell him what to do. And it's very much a hands-off approach to actually produce the quality that we get. It sounds a little bit silly, but if you're starting off with some really good products to start with, whether it's the fruit, whether it's the oak.
Yeah. For yourself, personal preference, is there a particular vintage and brand that you would love to, aside from the Screaming Eagle 92, that you would love to get your hands on to have the pleasure of selling? So that's something you can say on your CV if you wish. Right, I've sold this. I like a Domaine de la Romney Conti 45 or Mouton 45 or Le Pan 82 or Cheval Blanc 47. Are there any of those that, not just those examples, but any others out there where you've always thought, right, I would love to be able to deal with that?
Well, actually, Cheval 47, I'd love to find a perfect case of Cheval 47. I don't think they exist, actually. I'm not convinced. I mean, that would be the holy grail, because you actually see 47 Cheval pops up quite a bit, not Château bottles, normally merchant bottled, and they're never in particularly good condition. They're not as rare as people think, the 47 Cheval. It's something I'd love to try. I mean, that would be something quite, but I just don't. I think that just doesn't exist. No. I think. Where would you like to sort of really delve into? And we've got some 45s coming up in the next sale. I mean, that's a vintage that has that sort of romantic notion to the celebration of vintage. But I think actually you did say that Cheval 47. I think if I could find some of that
would be,
which is without question in great condition, people would with the right provenance, I think. When you talk about a bidding war, something like that.
That'll make all sorts of records.
Yeah,
definitely.
But whatever the whatever the Château have tucked away there will never. No. It'll never come out, and it'll be.
It's part of history.
Yeah, that's part of their history. I'd love to know how much they've got if they do have.
Well, we never know. We never know.
You know, I mean, that to me is the sort of iconic wine. You know, it was meant to still be young now.
It is. It's meant to last still a good few years. You know, it's got big scores and big reputation. So we'll see. But all right. So of course,
and 1900 Margot. If you could find something.
Yeah,
that's the other one I'd love to try. Oh, these are sort of the classics, though, aren't they?
I remember. I think there was even an auction several years ago. Like Lafitte's directly from the sellers were selling off like 1870s and 1895s and whatnot. And but like I said, they're historic, and people would buy it from that standpoint. Yeah, you know, even like shipwrecked champagne and things like that. That'd
be quite fun. I mean, that's the beauty of auction. You know, those are the things that come your way that wouldn't necessarily go. No. You know, shipwrecked. You know, things that have been under the Barents Sea for however long, and
exactly.
And but they're actually talking about that. That's sort of going off tangent. I think Margaux and champagne houses, but I think Château Margaux, not only they are experimenting with screw caps.
That's true.
But they're also experimenting with aging their wine underwater.
Wow.
Yeah. Once it's in bottle.
That's
like
a bit
they do it. So it's absolutely constant temperature.
Wow.
Yeah.
That should be interesting.
Obviously, before they put the labels on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hopefully, it affects the provenance. You've mentioned in the past that Robert Parker Jr. played an important role in Bordeaux Château becoming the benchmark of wine across the world. With the 2009 vintage, he awarded the Haut-Bailly 2009 a perfect 100-point score after realising he had made a mistake by giving it a lesser score. Paying great compliments to yourself and Robert Wilmers in his tasting notes. Obviously, you mentioned off camera you've had a couple more 100 points since then, so you're up to 3. I'm sure that's not the last. And this helped raise the reputation even more so of Haut-Bailly. What legacy do you feel that Robert Parker has left behind now he's retired? And how important do you see the role of fine wine critique today? And when you also got that news about the 100 point, I'm sure it must have felt great, much like when a restaurant gets a Michelin star.
Every good news like that is something very special because, you know, we work a whole year to give birth to something quite special. So it's a lot of energy, a lot of efforts you put in. So when you see your efforts, how do you say that, having success,
yes,
it's a great feeling for the whole team and a great recognition actually. So Robert Parker definitely did a lot for Bordeaux in the sense that he made wine becoming popular. I think before he arrived, people knew about wine, but he made it more simple to understand for certain countries who could maybe had less time to read about, you know, comments, wines, etc. But they would feel reassured by the fact that they would buy a 95 point, and you know.
Yes.
So it's a kind of popularized. How do you say that?
Yes.
Wine.
Yeah.
So I think our industry in general should be very thankful to him for having been such an ambassador, an advocate for the wines, and making lots of new countries enjoying wine. So that's something very important. at this time, he was the only one. Today, I think there is a multiplicity of critics, which is excellent also,
Definitely.
because, we are all surrounded by much too many information. But information tomorrow will be key. And you need the good data. You need to have the right elements to make decision. And I think you probably have around the world 20 or to 30 imported critics who have the expertise, who know their terroir, who know the different vintage you've been producing in the last few decades, who are competent to write about wine and deliver to the customers what they should know. What is this wine about? What is the taste? Describing with lots of words what will match your own taste. Because actually what is important when you're drinking and enjoying wine is that it's matching your taste. And there are so many different tastes around the world. I'm sure we don't taste exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And some people might prefer blockbuster wine. Some people might prefer elegant, delicate wine. And it's extremely important that those wines can be described in the right way with the right words.